In this video, I'm going to show you how to handle clicks on buttons in 3 different ways. So in order to do that, I'm going to change my relative layout. So this is just the main activity with a blank activity main XML. I'm going to change the relative layout there to a linear layout, and just make sure about the spelling there for the linear layout. And then I'm going to go to Android orientation property, and I'm going to set that property to vertical. So it's going to be a vertical linear layout. If I go back to design now, you can see it's linear layout vertical, and we can start adding components. So what I want to do, I want to show you 3 different ways on how you can use the click events on buttons. So I'm going to drag in 3 different buttons, and that's all we're going to have, and then show you how can we do this 3 buttons on 3 different ways. Okay, so let's just set some text for those 3 buttons. So I'm going to go to the strings XML, and then in the strings XML, I'm going to add string name, and that first one is going to be button 1. I'm just going to give it really descriptive names. So let's just call it 1. And then btn 2, that will be 2. And then for this example, btn 3. I was actually just making a joke. It is not descriptive, so please do not do this at home. Okay, so it's 1, 2, and 3. That's just the names of the buttons, just for this example. So if we go back, click on the 3 dots, go to btn 1, so that will set the text to 1. Go to the 3 dots, btn 2, which will set the text to 2, and then go to btn 3, which will set the text to 3. So that's button 1, 2, and 3. And then let's go and set some IDs for these 3. So I'm going to say btn 1. That one will be btn 2, and that one will be btn 3. Okay, so you can see the IDs on the right hand side there, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so the IDs are set up, they've got text on it. Now let's start with the 3 different ways on how we can handle clicks on buttons. So the very first way, you actually do not need an ID for the button if you're only going to use one button. So let's set up that one. The first one is to just go to your activity where you're going to use the button, and then just create one method. So we're going to say public void, and try to use this method or create this method as descriptive as possible. So in this case, it's not really difficult to do because it's named button 1. And then in brackets, it accepts a view object. So I'm just calling it view v. And now, in order for me to connect the button to this method, I need to go back, click on the button, and then go down to the onClick property. So in most of my videos, this is the method that I use. So just choose the method there in the onClick property from the list, btn1. So what I can do now is I can go and also connect 2 and 3, all 3 of my buttons, or all 10 buttons, or all 20 buttons. I can connect all of them with this onClick property to the very same method. So when all of my buttons are connected to the same method, I can just reference this v object there, which will indicate the button that was clicked. So just remember that everything on this layout is called a view. So buttons are views, text views are views, and so forth. So if I click one of these buttons, it will be indicated by this v object there. So we could actually use a switch statement to go and say v.getID, which will get the ID of the specific view that activated this method. So then the IDs are btn 1, 2, and 3. So if all of them are connected, I can just use the switch to see which one actually activated this method. So then we can use the case to say, well, if this is r.id.btn1, if it's button 1 that activated, we're going to do this. And somewhere in between, we're going to break. And so we can go for case 2, case r.id.btn2, case but btn3, and so forth to run through all of these 3 different buttons. Okay, so at this stage, I'm just going to show a toast there. So I'm just going to show toast, main activity.this, and then we're going to say button 1 clicked. Okay. Right, so this is just going to show a toast. Then when we click the button, it's going to show a toast. But remember, because we're only connecting one method, or one button to this method, we do not need the switch in the case. We can just do everything inside of the method. Okay, so the second way of doing this, we need IDs for our buttons. So if you're only going to do one button and not connect it to a specific, or not connect all three of the buttons to a specific method, and only connect one to this method, then you don't need an ID for your button. But if you're going to connect two or more, you need IDs so that you can indicate it in the case. And then for the second and the third way of doing buttons, we also need the IDs. So I'm going to set up those two buttons quickly. So the one is called BTN, we did one already, 2, and BTN 3. And then if you've got this import problem, just Alt-Enter over it, and you can say import class. Okay, then how to set it up? We're going to say BTN2 dot set on click listener. Before we do the set on click listener, let's just initialize this button. So we're going to say this is a button. Come on. All right, button, find the view by its ID, r.id and btn2. So which means that on the layout, we've called it btn2. So I'm making a connection on the layout. Find the view by its ID on which layout? On the layout that you set on set content view, which is activity main. So we make a connection to btn2. This one returns a view, so we're converting that view to a button and make a connection to the button. Let's do the same for the second button or the third button. BTN3 equals button find view by ID r.id.btn3. Okay, and there we go. So these two buttons are now connected, and now let's just do that part again. BTN2 dot set on click listener, and this is now the second way of doing a button. You need to first initialize the button, and then we set an on click listener, and then we can do an inline on click listener by just saying new on click listener of type Android view, and then if you click, it will create that inline listener for you. And now when this button gets clicked, it's going to go into this on click method. So we can then just display a toast again, main activity dot this, and then the second argument the text, and we're just going to say button button 2 clicked. Okay, so that's the second way of doing a button. So the first way, just connecting it to a method. The second way, doing an inline on click listener. Okay, so that's the second part. The third way that you can do it is to have your class implement. You're going to say implements, and then you're going to implement this on click listener of type view. Okay, so if you say on click listener of type view, you will see that it gives you an error here basically, where it says that it should either be declared abstract or implement the abstract method. So we need a method that we need to use in this class if we want to implement the on click listener. So this method is the important method now. So you're going to right click there somewhere and go to generate, and then choose override methods. Let me just move up a bit there. So right click, generate, and then implement methods. And you can see there's the on click method that we need to implement. So we're going to say okay, and then there's the on click method, which means that our class, remember that implements means this main activity is an on click listener. So in this case, our main activity is an on click listener. So we can just say connecting any one of the buttons to this main activity will make it, and we'll basically use this on click method here to make that an on click listener. So we're going to say for the BTN3, we're going to say set on click listener like we did there, but instead of doing an inline on click listener, we're just going to indicate this class of ours. So you can also say main activity dot this if you want to be a bit more specific, but it's this main activity of ours that we're currently working with, which is an on click listener, and we're setting the button to that on click listener. So when this button now gets clicked, it's going to go to this on click method that we added now with that implement methods. So this method will then run for button 3. But we could have also said, let's connect button 2, button 3, and button 1. For all of them, we're going to say set on click listener main activity.this. Then it means all of 3 of the buttons will come to this one method, and you can use that V object just like we did here to do the exact same thing. So for now, I'm just going to display a toast, and we're going to say there button 3 clicked. Okay, so I'm not going to run this application. This is a very simple application. You can try this out by yourself. So the very first option is to just go and create a method that accepts a view in brackets, any method which does not return anything, and then go to your specific button and set the on-click property. The second one is to use this inline on-click listener, and the third way is to actually make your class an on-click listener, and then use the on-click method to connect the button.